In the crowded dance floor of American Bandstand, one face stood out with unmistakable flair. Carmen Jimenez, with her dark hair marked by a bold blonde streak, brought something few others could, a Latin rhythm that felt both fresh and electric. Viewers across the nation, sitting in living rooms with black and white televisions glowing in the late 1950s, saw not just another teenager dancing, but a young woman who carried a cultural identity onto the screen. Carmen was among the first Latina dancers to appear regularly on the show. Alongside her sister Ivette, she offered representation at a time when mainstream television rarely showcased diversity. Her presence added color to an already vibrant stage, and her confident movements made audiences feel the energy of a new America, one more open to different voices and styles. Yet for all the eyes she captured in those afternoons, Carmen's story remains half-remembered. How could someone who lit up the screen with such individuality quietly step back into ordinary life? This journey is not only about a dancer's rise and departure, but about the memory of an era we still carry today. Before she ever set foot on the polished floor of Studio B, Carmen Jimenez was simply a girl from Philadelphia's Kensington neighborhood. Her family had Puerto Rican roots, and like many immigrant families of the post-war years, they carried both the struggles and the spirit of starting fresh in America. Kensington in the 1950s was a mix of working-class households, small businesses, and a sense of community where neighbors knew one another and children filled the streets after school. Carmen grew up in a large family with siblings who would become her closest companions. Her sister Ivette, especially, shared her love for music and dance, and together they would rehearse steps at home. The Jimenez household was filled with sounds from the radio, Elvis Presley, doo-wop harmonies, and the pulsing beat of early rock and roll. But there was also the rhythm of Latin music, the songs of Puerto Rico that connected them to their heritage. That mix of influences became the soundtrack of Carmen's teenage years. Like most young girls of her time, she went to school, dreamed about the future, and watched television when she could. Yet there was a spark in her that set her apart, an energy in the way she moved, a curiosity about performing, and a joy that seemed to rise with every note of a song. While other teenagers passed the hours talking on the front steps or hanging out at corner stores, Carmen and Ivette were often practicing dance routines, turning their small living room into a rehearsal hall. Her parents, Victor and his wife, balanced pride and concern. They wanted their daughters to do well in school and keep sight of practical goals, but they also understood the happiness dancing brought them. That support created a foundation strong enough to carry Carmen into the unfamiliar world of television. What began as simple afternoons of music and laughter at home would soon lead her to the most famous teen stage in America. For teenagers in Philadelphia, American Bandstand wasn't just a television show. It was a dream, a door to national recognition that stood only a bus ride away. Carmen Jimenez first heard about it through friends at school who whispered about the long lines outside Studio B and the chance to be seen by Dick Clark himself. At the time, she and her sister Ivette were already known among their peers as stylish girls who loved to dance. The idea of stepping onto that stage was both thrilling and unimaginable. One afternoon, curiosity turned into courage. Carmen joined the crowd gathering outside the studio, waiting for the chance to enter. The scene was unforgettable. Teenagers lined the sidewalk in their best clothes, radios buzzing with the latest rock and roll hits, the anticipation almost louder than the music itself. She clutched her sister's hand, both nervous and excited, as the doors finally opened. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Bright studio lights reflected off polished floors, the sound of records spun loud enough to shake the walls, and cameras loomed above like silent giants. For Carmen, the first step onto that floor felt surreal. She wasn't just another teenager in Kensington anymore. Suddenly, she was part of something the entire country was watching. Her first time on air was a blur of adrenaline. The music started, her feet followed instinct, and her heart pounded with every beat. She could feel the rhythm of both her Puerto Rican heritage and American rock blending into her steps. When she later saw herself on television, dancing in front of millions, it was as if the world had opened in an instant. That debut was more than a lucky break. It was the start of Carmen's transformation from a neighborhood girl to a recognizable face across America. From that day forward, she was no longer just watching culture unfold. She was part of the movement itself. Once Carmen Jimenez settled into the rhythm of American Bandstand, it didn't take long before she became a face the audience remembered. The combination of her striking appearance, the dark hair highlighted with a blonde streak across her bangs, and her graceful, confident dancing made her stand out among dozens of other teenagers on the floor. Week after week, when viewers tuned in, they saw Carmen bringing something uniquely her own, and that consistency began to build her reputation. She wasn't just dancing, she was interpreting the music with a style that felt both modern and rooted in her heritage. While many dancers followed the rock and roll steps of the moment, Carmen wove in a Latin rhythm that gave her movements an extra spark. This flair didn't go unnoticed. Fan letters arrived at the studio, praising her energy, her look, and her ability to make every dance seem effortless. Magazines catering to teenagers began to mention her by name, sometimes alongside her sister Ivette, calling them a refreshing addition to the show. On camera, Carmen projected warmth and confidence. She smiled easily, and that smile became part of her identity. Teenagers across America tried to imitate her style, from her clothes to her hair, and for many girls of Puerto Rican or Latino background, she symbolized representation they had rarely seen on national television. Her highlight moment came with the 1961 pony dance contest, where she and Frank Vacca placed third. Though not a championship win, it cemented her image as a serious dancer capable of shining in competition. The excitement of that contest was replayed in the memories of viewers who still recall seeing her spin across the floor with precision and flair. During this period, Carmen was no longer simply a neighborhood girl from Kensington. She was a teen idol in her own right, someone whose presence on screen helped shape how an entire generation remembered the music and dances of their youth. If Carmen Jimenez was captivating on her own, she was just as memorable when paired with a partner. Over her time on American Bandstand, she often danced with names like Mike Balara, Eddie Kelly, and Frank Vacca. Each partnership gave viewers a different glimpse of her adaptability, sometimes playful, sometimes elegant, always in sync with the music. Among these, her routines with Frank Vacca drew particular attention, especially when the two earned third place in the pony dance contest of 1961. To fans, it wasn't only about rankings, it was about the chemistry they projected on screen. Behind the cameras, however, life was more complicated. Bandstand dancers weren't paid professionals, and the teenagers had to balance school, family responsibilities, and hours spent waiting at the studio. Carmen and her sister often rushed from classes straight into the line outside, eager to claim a spot on the floor. Inside, competition could be fierce. Everyone wanted more screen time, and the producers favored dancers who brought energy and visual appeal. Carmen's signature look and Latin style helped her stand out, but she still felt the pressure of staying fresh in front of a national audience. Fan clubs sprang up, and letters poured in, tokens of admiration from teenagers across the country who thought of Carmen and her partners as the embodiment of cool. Yet the attention also brought strict expectations. Rules against getting too close on the floor or against commercializing their fame kept the dancers in check. Even with these constraints, Carmen managed to remain natural and unforced, radiating the kind of joy that cameras could not miss. There were moments of laughter too, missteps, playful shoves, or times when the music skipped and dancers had to improvise. Carmen carried herself with ease, never letting the small mishaps show on her face. What the audience saw was a young woman who loved to dance and shared that love with the world. As dazzling as the spotlight on American Bandstand could be, it was never meant to last forever. For Carmen Jimenez, the first signs of change arrived quietly. School commitments and family responsibilities began to pull her in different directions. Hours spent queuing outside Studio B, the rehearsals, the long afternoons of filming, all of it started to conflict with the steady rhythm of daily life. What once felt like a dream opportunity slowly became harder to balance. There was also the invisible weight of expectations. Being one of the few Latina faces on national television, Carmen carried more than just her own image. She represented something larger, diversity on a program that rarely showcased it. That kind of visibility brought admiration, but it also meant scrutiny. To maintain her place on screen, she had to look flawless, dance with energy, and never falter, week after week. Over time, that pressure began to wear on her. Meanwhile, the show itself was evolving. New dancers entered, styles shifted, and the competitive energy intensified. Even within her circle of friends, there was an unspoken rivalry for screen time. Carmen, who had once glided into the spotlight with ease, now found herself questioning whether she wanted to fight for it. The turning point came when she realized that the glamour of Bandstand, while thrilling, could not define her entire life. She had dreams beyond the cameras, and she longed for the stability of an ordinary routine. Choosing to step away was not easy. After all, millions of viewers still recognized her, but it was necessary. Her departure surprised many fans who wondered where she had gone. For Carmen, it was a bittersweet moment, the sadness of leaving behind the music and the stage, paired with the relief of reclaiming her time and her own identity. The applause had faded, but a new chapter was waiting, one that would test her in very different ways. Leaving the bandstand floor did not mean leaving behind the person she had become. For Carmen Jimenez, stepping out of the spotlight was a chance to rediscover life on her own terms. She returned to the rhythms of Philadelphia, where family remained the anchor of her days. With her sister Ivette close by, the two continued to share their love of music and style, even if it was no longer under the glare of studio lights. Carmen found work that reflected her creativity in different ways. At one point, the Jimenez sisters were connected with running a salon, using their flair for fashion and presentation to serve their community. It was a natural extension of the image she had crafted on television, now applied to everyday life. Friends and neighbors remembered her not just as the girl from Bandstand, but as someone approachable and grounded. Yet the bond with American Bandstand never completely disappeared. She attended reunion events such as gatherings in the 2000s where former dancers came together and fans were able to see their favorites once again. In photographs from those reunions, Carmen's presence rekindled memories for viewers who had not forgotten her signature blonde streak and radiant smile. These appearances reminded people that although decades had passed, she remained a living thread to an era that still felt golden in memory. At home, Carmen embraced the quiet satisfactions that fame could never provide. She valued family moments, community ties, and the small joys of ordinary days. For her, the years on television became a treasured chapter, but not the entire story. She had moved forward, proving that life beyond the camera could hold just as much meaning. Her journey reflected something many former bandstand dancers shared, the ability to step back into normal life while carrying a legacy that no one could take away. Carmen showed that the glow of youth, once seen by millions, could live on in the warmth of everyday connections. Carmen Jimenez's story is more than a footnote in television history. It is a testament to how a single dancer could embody the spirit of an era. With her blonde-streaked bangs, her graceful style, and her subtle Latin flair, she brought individuality to a stage watched by millions. She reminded America that music and dance were universal languages, and that even in the homogeneous world of 1950s television, diversity had its place. For those who tuned in after school, Carmen remains unforgettable. They can still picture her gliding across the floor, smiling as if the music itself was a secret only she understood. Her presence made American Bandstand richer, and her decision to step away showed courage, the courage to define her life on her own terms. Were you one of those viewers who saw Carmen dance side by side with her sister Ivette all those years ago? What memory of those afternoons still lives in your heart? Share your story below, and together we can keep the golden days of Bandstand alive.